When we talk about learning, there are many words and phrases and definitions that come to mind. What is learning encapsulates almost everything we do from conception to death and beyond, depending on your beliefs. But one thing is for sure, it doesn't happen without the brain. So that would be a good place to start our conversation about what is learning. Human beings are learning machines, but it takes some years before we become aware of this. In the womb, and years before human speaks, the brain seems to be on automatic, making connections, building pathways, making meaning of the inputs from our senses. The brain. The frontal lobe is responsible for reasoning, planning, parts of speech and movement, emotions and problem solving, while the occipital lobe is concerned with many aspects of vision. The parental lobe is responsible for the perception of stimuli related to touch, pressure, temperature and pain. The temporal lobe is involved in the perception and recognition of auditory stimuli, that is hearing and memory. Brainstem, this is part of the brain that connects to the spinal cord. The brainstem controls functions such as heart rate, breathing, digestive processes, and sleeping. Cerebellum coordinates the brain's instructions for skilled repetitive movements and helps maintain balance and posture. Brain transmissions. Neurons transmit impulses along the axon and across the synapse to the dendrites of the neighbouring cell. So that's how they operate. What do they do? Well, learning occurs by changing the synapses so that the influence of one neuron on another also changes, a bit like a dominoes effect. The more complex the skills demanded in an occupation, the more dendrites were found on the neurons, creates more sites in which to store learnings. So keeping an active brain allows you to store more understandings and more information. Connections the brain finds useful become permanent, and those not so useful are eliminated as the brain selectively strengthens and prunes connections based on experience. So what are the implications for teaching and learning? In fact, what are the implications for us as learners taking on this information in this presentation? What will your brain prune overnight from this talk? So let's look at learning. What do we think learning is? A change in behaviour or understanding? A process or an end product? Is it how we create memories? Is it how the brain puts together information to form a concept, an idea, an understanding, a proficiency? What do you think of when you think about learning? You might like to write down a few words that come to mind. Learning includes acquiring knowledge and skills, but it's also about applying them. So learning as a process. Learning as memorising. Learning as storing information that can be reproduced. Learning as acquiring facts, skills and methods that can be retained and used whenever required. Learning as making sense or abstracting meaning. Learning also involves relating parts of the subject matter to each other and to real life. Learning as interpreting and understanding reality in a different way. So this might involve comprehending the world and reinterpreting knowledge. What does learning involve? Well, it's about acquiring new knowledge and skills, drawing on prior knowledge and experience to make connections, recalling past experiences. It involves problem solving, generalising and hypothesising. It's about making choices. It's practising and applying new knowledge. It involves observing, asking questions, and evaluating ideas, understanding symbols in both spoken and written languages. The list is endless. Learning is spontaneous, individualistic, and often earned through effort. It is time-worn, slow and gradual, fits and starts kind of process, which can have a flow of its own, but requires passion, patience, and attention to detail from both the teacher and learner. So how do we acquire this learning? Well, this will depend on your learning style. We're going to look at 3 key learning styles and talk them through. Visual learner learns best by seeing, the auditory learner by hearing, the kinesthetic learner who learns best by feeling or experiencing. Learning styles are a set of assumptions around how someone uses their senses to perceive and process information, how their brain stores and processes information, and how they organise and present information. Do you have a preference in the way you like to learn? Well, let's look at the visual learners. Watches a segment from a cooking show on how to prepare and make the best pork crackle. An auditory learner hears a chef on the radio talk back slow and show explaining how to prepare and make the best pork crackle. Kinesthetic learner attends a weekend cooking class on how to prepare and make the best pork crackle. Which of those 3 options would you choose? Watch a segment on a cooking show, listen to a talkback show on radio, or attend weekend cooking? While the research has shown a connection with learning styles, the research has so far been unable to prove that using one's learning style provides the best means for learning a task or subject. This is probably because it is more of a preference rather than a style. Learners use all 3 styles to receive and learn new information and experiences. However, according to visual auditory kinesthetic theory, called VAC, 1 or 2 of these receiving styles is normally dominant. This dominant style defines the best way for a person to learn new information by filtering what is to be learned. This style may not always be the same for some tasks. The learner may prefer one style of learning for one task and a combination of others for a different task. So how best to respond to or recognise auditory learners? They often talk to themselves. They may have difficulty with reading and writing tasks. Beginning new material with a brief explanation of what is coming and a conclusion with a summary of what has been covered is helpful. Including auditory activities such as brainstorming, buzz groups, or Jeopardy. They might move their lips when they read out loud. They are often better talking to a colleague or a tape recorder and hearing what was said. Question learners draw as much information from them as possible and then fill in the gaps with their own expertise. Leave plenty of time to debrief activities. This allows auditory learners to make connections of what they learned and how it applies to their situation. So what do we do when we're dealing with visual learners and how will we recognise them? There are 2 subsets to visual learners: linguistic, like to learn through written language, and spatial. They usually have difficulty with the written language and do better with charts, demonstrations, videos, and other visual materials. So with visual learners, the use of graphs, charts, illustrations, or other visual aids include outlines, concept maps, agendas, handouts for reading and taking notes. Include plenty of content in handouts to reread after the learning lesson. Leave white space in handouts for note-taking. Invite questions to help them stay alert in the auditory environments. Supplement text with illustrations wherever possible. Eliminate potential distractions. Use flip charts to show what will come and what has been presented. Emphasise key points to cue when it takes notes, when to take notes, and have students visualise the topic or have them act out the topic. Kinesthetic learners, once again, 2 subsets. The kinesthetic, those who like to learn through movement, and the tactile, through touch. So use activities that get the learners up and moving. Provide toys such as stress balls and Play-Doh to give them something to do with their hands. Play music when appropriate during activities. Provide highlighters, coloured pens and/or pencils to use. Give frequent stretch breaks or brain breaks. Have them transfer information from the text to another medium, such as a keyboard or a tablet. Give learners through a visualisation of complex tasks. Emphasise key points on flip charts or whiteboards. So how do we help others to learn? We need to examine theories of learning. That's part of understanding how learning occurs. We need to question our experiences of learning and reflect on ideas that underpin our understanding of learning. We need to understand learners and their needs. And we need to think about our own beliefs regarding learning. So here we are back at the beginning with understanding how we learn, how our brain absorbs new knowledge and skills in relation to our learning styles as a set of assumptions around how someone uses their senses to perceive and process information, how the brain stores and processes information, and how these are organised to present information. Learning is an experience. Everything else is just information. Thank you for listening to the talk about learning.